Hi, welcome back to Plating Profit. I'm Stephen Bonin, the founder of Chef Plus Strategic Bookkeeping and Advisory for the F&B industry. If you're running a restaurant, a cafe, a bakery, or anything in between, and you're tired of working hard and wondering where your money went at the end of all your work, you're in the right spot. This is episode 3, where we're going over what I call the assumption tax and finding out just where the difference is between what you think you should be making and what you're actually making. Let's jump in. A few months ago, I was sitting across from two operators at their prep table. It was a husband and wife team, and between them, they had close to 30 years behind the line. They'd just signed a lease on a new space and were building out a lunch program from scratch. It was a solid concept with good product, and they had a pricing model they had been working on for weeks that they felt really good about. One of their core items was a specialty bread. It was house-made and central to their flagship sandwich, the item they were planning to lead with on opening day. They had costed to about $2 a portion. I remember looking at that number on their sheet, and I already had a feeling, because I've seen this before, and I myself ran a very successful sandwich shop. That number had never actually been verified when I asked them. There was a recipe card, but no real yield calculation, no invoice breakdown. They just kind of back of the napkin math did at $2 at some point in their journey. And it seemed reasonable. It got written down, and from that day forward, every single pricing decision they made was built with that on top of it. So I opened up the profit dashboard right there on the table, and I said, let's do this together right now. It will take maybe 15 minutes. When we did that, the actual cost of the bread was 78 cents. Not $2, 78 cents. Now I know what you're thinking. Good news, lower cost, more margin, problem solved. And yes, in a way. But here's what I was thinking sitting there. The wrong number hadn't just affected their margin, it had been quietly pushing their combo price higher than it needed to be for weeks. And in a price-sensitive lunch market, every dollar of unnecessary price is a customer who looked at your menu, looked at the place down the street, and chose the place down the street. You don't see that loss on a P&L. It doesn't show up anywhere, but it's absolutely real. And here's what I've learned after 30 years of watching this play out. Wrong assumptions in either direction cost you. Too high and you bleed volume. Too low and you bleed margin. And the fix is the same either way. You replace the guess with a real number. The gap between those two, between what you think something costs and what it actually costs, that's what I call the assumption tax. And every F&B operator I've ever worked with is paying it. So let me show you what the assumption tax looks like in real money. Think about your best-selling item right now. Do you actually know what it costs to the gram? If you hesitated on that, stay with me. Take that gap between what you think it costs and what it actually costs. And now multiply that by every unit you sell, by every day, by every week, by every month. That number will surprise you. Sometimes the assumption runs high, like the bread. You're leaving sales on the table without knowing it. Your customers are going elsewhere and you're telling yourself it's just a slow week. But more often, and this is the one that really hurts, is that your assumption runs low. You think the combo is profitable. You've never actually costed the sauce, the side, the garnish, and you've been quietly subsidizing that combo for months, maybe years. Now let me give you a real example of what this looks like. I worked with another operator, and he'd been open for 4 years and was a popular neighborhood spot with a great loyal customer base. They had a house dressing they'd been making since day one. It was a killer recipe. They used high quality olive oil as the base with a few aromatics. They finished a baby arugula garnish on one of their most popular starters. Customers loved it. The staff loved making it. Nobody had ever thought about it as a cost because it was just a garnish, right? When we ran the numbers, that dressing cost them $4,800 that year and was 14% of the cost of that dish for a garnish. Before we costed that number, they had no options. Once we knew the number, we had 2 different options that we could take. The first was to raise the price of the dish to account for it, or take an honest look at whether that garnish was doing enough for that dish to justify what it costs, and whether doing something similar will do the same job for a fraction of the price. Either way, a decision had to be made, and that's control. Without that number, there's no decision, there's just bleed. Nobody intended to give away 4,800. It just happened, one unexamined assumption at a time. In my experience, the assumption tax hides in the same 4 spots every single time. The first one is when portion sizes live inside someone's head. Your recipe says 4 ounces. The cook who's been there for 3 years, good cook, reliable, showed up. He's your best closer on a Saturday night. But he's eyeballing these 4 ounces. And because it looks right to him, he's not cutting corners, really. It's just nobody has ever showed him otherwise. And when you actually weigh his portions, he's giving away 6 ounces every time. And on a busy service, that's a 25% food cost increase on that item. That's invisible. Shift after shift, week after week, year after year. The second one is garnishes and add-ons that never got costed. The lemon wedge, the house sauce on the side, the extra pickle that goes out on every plate because it just looks good on the board or just seems to need to be there. Individually, they're nothing, but you add them off every plate, every service, every week, and that's hundreds of dollars a month leaving your kitchen untracked. The third one, and this is genuinely the most common one I find, is batch yields that got estimated and never actually measured. So say you bought a case of broccoli and you assumed an 85% yield. That seems about right, but your team was trained to prep it aggressively. Nice tight florets, no waste, and the actual yield after the trim was taken was about 65%. That's a 20% gap just sitting there in your cost structure. I've seen this on a single ingredient alone costs an operator thousands of dollars a year. The fourth place I see the assumption tax really make a difference is combos that are priced based on your gut feel. The sandwich is $12. You add a drink and a side and you're at $14.99. That feels right. It feels normal for the customer and it feels like you're making margins for you. But nobody ran the full component cost for that combo. The sauce, the packaging, the side portion, the actual margin might be half of what you think it is. So it's important to know none of these are careless and none of them are just stupid mistakes. You built something that moves fast. You priced on experience and on what the competition was charging, and you just kept moving on to the next fire. Because this is what the industry demands of you every single day. It could be a toilet overflowing. It could be staff not coming in. Nobody's handed you a system for costing to the gram. The assumptions just fill in where that data should be, but that assumption is not free. Math is actually the easy part. This is the P in the profit framework. P means pricing accuracy. Pricing actually means every ingredient, every component, every add-on is costed to the unit, per gram, per piece, per batch, before the price is set, before the combo is built, before the menu goes to print. When we finished building that bread recipe at the table, less than 15 minutes of work, those two operators didn't need me to explain what to do next. They looked at each other, they looked at the number, and they adjusted their model right on the spot. This is why I do this work. Not because I showed them something they didn't know, but because we were able to replace one wrong number with the right one. And suddenly everything was possible that wasn't possible before. Now, I want to be honest about the hard part of this because it's not the math. The hardest part is sitting down and accepting that the number you've been operating with for months, or in some cases years, might be wrong. This can feel very uncomfortable and like you should have caught it sooner, like it reflects on you. But here's what I know after doing this with dozens of operators. You knew your business, you built it, you've shown up every day. You just didn't have the system yet. And there's a real difference between those two things. Here's my standard for every client I work with. Before I suggest a price change, I cost it to the gram first. Before I tell someone their combo is underpriced, I prove it on paper. Before I recommend pulling an item from the menu, I run the actual unit economics, not the estimated ones, the real ones. Because once you have the real number, the decision usually makes itself. That husband and wife from the opening, once we had the real bread cost, they didn't need me to say anything. They looked at the number, looked at each other, and started adjusting the model right there at the prep table. The combo worked, the program was viable, they just needed the actual number. If any of this sounds familiar, go to thechefplus.com and take the free profit diagnosis. 20 questions, 3 minutes, and you'll leave knowing exactly where your margin is going and what that gap is costing you every year. My name is Stephen Bonin, founder of Chef Plus. I'm wishing you a great and profitable week, and I'll see you in the next one.